Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again to our third and final installment in our look at the PlayStation 1 James Bond video games. 1999's Tomorrow Never Dies, and yes, you heard it right, this movie tie-in video game came out 2 years after the movie it was supposed to tie into. But then GoldenEye for the N64 did the same thing, and it didn't hurt that game, right? Tomorrow Never Dies was in fact the follow-up home console Bond game to the iconic Nintendo Bond shooter. However, by this point the Bond license had changed hands and rested with Electronic Arts, who would go on to release some of the very best 007 games of all time with Nightfire and Everything or Nothing, so it is something of a dawn of a new era for the video game Bond. The other PS1 era Bond games have been a bit of a mixed bag for me. I thought that The World Is Not Enough was a solid enough shooter, but 007 Racing was an excruciatingly hellish experience, and so, as with my previous Bond game reviews, I will be looking at Tomorrow Never Dies from the perspective of a Bond fan, rather than as a hardcore gamer. Is this game worth a Bond fan's time to scour eBay for, or even just dust off the old PlayStation for a nostalgic whirl? That's what we're going to be looking at today for Tomorrow Never Dies for the PlayStation 1. Loading up the disc, players will be treated to a trailer of sorts, featuring various moments of gameplay edited in with clips from the movie, and it's immediately clear that unlike GoldenEye 64, this game is not a first-person shooter, but instead puts the player in control of Bond through a third-person perspective. This is kind of brave and interesting, I think. Like, coming off the back of a big success like GoldenEye for the N64, you'd think they'd just, yeah, we'll have more of that, please. But no, they take a different tact completely. Starting the first level leads you into a customary MI6 briefing, and if you're as much of a Bond geek as I am, you're probably having some deja vu looking at this particular interface, and that's probably because, like me, you had the Tomorrow Never Dies Special Edition DVD, and the MI6 interface here is remarkably similar to the one used on that DVD menu. I know this is the absolute minutest of points to be making, but hey, welcome to my channel. But I do think it's interesting that someone somewhere made the creative decision that that interface is what is going to be representative of Tomorrow Never Dies throughout all different kinds of media, and it even trickled its way through to the games, and I think that that is of note. The narrative of the game begins shortly before the events of the film. Bond is tasked with taking out a communications dish on the Russian border, which is decoding the positions of British satellites. You need to find the dish and mark it for airstrike, and this is all conveyed through possibly the worst Judi Dench impression I've ever heard.
Remember to keep a safe distance from the target. We can't afford to lose you, 007.
And that's coming from someone who loves to do their own Judi Dench impersonations.
Anyway, on with the game. To get to the dish, you must control Bond making his way through a military outpost, shooting goons along the way. Right off the bat, though, some things about the perspectives. I do find it interesting that when you aim your shot, the perspective switches to first person. It feels like it might have been trying some sort of merging of those perspectives to satisfy some of the GoldenEye crowd. What this ends up doing, though, is making the aiming system incredibly clunky. The auto-aim is bad enough, but switching perspectives and having to line up a shot whilst in the middle of taking damage is far from a seamless experience. Something else of note, there are a couple of options to play with that may affect your playing perspective too, including the ability to tweak how the camera moves in certain environments, and also the ability to trigger a ghost Bond, which basically means that the Bond model turns transparent when the camera has nowhere else to go and it gets a little bit too close on the back of Bond's head. It really doesn't matter how you set these features, because the camera is going to find ways to metaphorically hit you in the balls with a thick bit of rope either way. So yeah, clunky controls and bad camera, and it's already causing problems on the first and supposedly easiest of the levels. Strap in, folks, this is gonna be a bumpy one. At least we have a nice Pierce Brosnan model and a twanging bit of Bond theme playing in the soundtrack. For all my griping, at least here I do actually feel like I'm playing a Bond game. But just to get back to the griping, the controls here are so clunky, and even moving around the environment in a very basic way is really tricky, particularly on corners, where I found it really easy to get Bond stuck, and God, just walking over items to pick them up was such a challenge, and for posterity's sake, I was playing this on a PlayStation 2 and using controller with analog sticks, and at times I would switch to the D-pad to see how it played, but it was just as clunky either way in my experience. Anyway, on with the level. Using a laser designator from Q-Branch, Bond assigns the dish to be destroyed, and it very promptly is, and then after some more shooting, it happens. The four-letter word that I dread seeing in a Bond video game appears, a word that conjures up such profound fear and distaste in one's mouth, a word that leads dogs to form into packs and blood to seep from the walls.
Skis.
Okay, so for those of you who might not have seen my previous Bond video game reviews, I do not think that Bond games cope well with this particular winter sport, and previous skiing levels on other Bond games have been some of the most frustrating experiences of my life. So I am not terribly thrilled about this development, but being the completist that I am, I will persevere with it, and we can get through this together. You only live twice. Once when you're born, and once when you play a skiing level on a James Bond video game. Okay, let's go. Okay, just get through this. We can do this, and... actually, not handling too bad. This is pretty alright. Yeah, not bad at all. Oh, bad guys! Oh, my sticks can do that, can they? Oh, nice, I get to do stunts. Oh, that's pretty alright. Okay. Hey, this is not handling too bad at all. Well, I can pick things up. I can ski through these trees perfectly fine. This is pretty good, and oh wow! Oh my god, am I actually having fun on a ski level? I never thought this day would come. Maybe ski levels aren't something to be completely dreaded. Maybe Zukovsky did survive the shot from Elektra. Maybe Mrs. Bell did pass her flying exam. Maybe everything's gonna be okay. Anyway, the level ends with Bond skiing off a cliff and opening up a parachute to reveal a Union Jack, which is splendid stuff. For all of my griping at the start of this, the second half of this level was an awful lot of fun, and so, you know what, my hopes are actually up a bit more than I expected after this experience. Thus ends the first level of the game, with some stats focused on your performance to wrap up. One of the stats is style, and I have no idea how that is calculated or what it's out of. I mean, is the style rating maxed out at 5,000? I don't know. Is this measured against the gold standard of style, or are we in metric or imperial style points? Who knows, who cares? That skiing was pretty good, so let's move on to the next level, which has you play through the actual pre-credit sequence from Tomorrow Never Dies. This is a very short level, and there are only really two relatively small areas of it. You have to photograph some of the weapons that are dotted around the place, and then just as you go into the second section of the level, Bond spies some nuclear weapons, which would not combine well with the incoming missile sent by the British Navy, so he calls in.
White Rook, we have a problem. That jet is armed with Soviet SB-5 nuclear warheads. If the incoming cruise missile detonates those warheads, you're going to have a nuclear disaster.
I do kind of love how he says, you're going to have a nuclear disaster, like, I think we're all in this same boat together, James. In fact, I think you're going to be having a problem with this nuclear disaster much sooner than the rest of us if those bombs go off. Bond in this game obviously has Pierce Brosnan's likeness, however, the voice belongs to... well, actually, I don't know. In several places online, Adam Blackwood is credited as voicing James Bond, but this is not true. Mark Edlitz, author of The Many Lives of James Bond, clears this up by interviewing a bunch of the Bond voice actors and receives a clarification from Blackwood himself that he has never actually voiced James Bond. Whilst I have played villains in a number of James Bond games, I have never actually voiced James Bond himself. It's weird how misinformation like this spreads, particularly as his Wikipedia page lists him as the voice actor for James Bond in 4 different games. As for who actually does voice James Bond in this game, I don't know. I mean, looking at the credits, I'm guessing it's this Stephen Critchlow guy, because his name comes top. I mean, it's not Adam Blackwood, we know that for sure, and Andrew Bicknell would go on to voice James Bond in Agent Under Fire, but the Bond here doesn't sound anything like him, so I guess it can't be him, so yeah, I'm gonna go with Stephen Critchlow for this. Anyway, this level has a very fun but all too short sequence where you actually get behind the controls of the fighter jet and recreate the moment from the film where Bond is firing at all the different things around him, and it's literally like 30 seconds, but it's 30 seconds of mindless destruction, which is always fun, and it's a good way to end the opening 2 levels of the game. A clip from the film takes us into the credit sequence, which plays just like in the film to Sheryl Crow's Tomorrow Never Dies, but the credits of the developers, staff, and voiceover artists play over the images, and I think this is quite cool, considering video game credits are often just stuffed at the very end of the game, particularly during this era, so it's nice that this game sought to replicate that James Bond feel by having pre-credits action followed by a credit sequence before continuing on with the story, and it was something of a pioneer when you think of what the state of the Bond games were like at this time. Which leads us into level 3, Carver Media in Hamburg, as M's exposition enlightens us to the sinking of a British naval vessel known as the Devonshire in the South China Sea, and because Elliot Carver's newspaper Tomorrow printed news of the story before MI6 could receive a full report, Bond is sent to pump Carver's wife, Paris, for information. This level is a lot of shooting around Carver's very high-tech and very blue Hamburg facility. At one point you enter a corridor adorned with 2-meter-tall posters of Carver, and it's quite clear that they didn't get Jonathan Pryce's likeness for the character, and I guess it's either just a face made by an artist, or maybe it's one of the voice actors' likenesses, but either way, this face just makes me think of Oh lordy, I never thought I'd be talking about this guy on my channel, but, do people here know... Do people here know Paul O'Grady?
All right, Buster, get off me post bag. Thanks for that, Shirley. Hey up, Bust. Oh, he's on there. Did you coming off over? He picked him up. They got swung him round by his tail and lobbed him across the room.
Okay, so Paul O'Grady is a British TV host, and he's all I can see when I look at Elliot Carver in this game, so it's quite jarring when you eventually meet Elliot and he doesn't sound like he's from Liverpool.
Ah, Mr. Bond. Won't you allow me to give you a tour of the facilities?
But before that, Bond meets with Paris, and just as in the film, these two clearly have some past history.
I wondered what it would feel like if I ever saw you again. Ah! Now I know.
Jesus, the sound of that hit! I'm surprised his head didn't fly clean off his shoulders. I also can't tell if this character is supposed to be using the likeness of movie actress Terry Hatcher, or if she's supposed to be a 3D version of that Modigliani painting that Severine is flogging in Skyfall. Anyway, Bond is apprehended by one of Carver's men and wakes up in an interrogation room, and in a quite cool moment, you use a cufflink gadget to break the glass and escape, and gadgets have actually been incorporated into the game quite well so far. It's always good to have plenty of gadgets to use and play with in Bond games, and shooting your way back to where you started the level finishes the level, and then you get your score. My style score has plummeted from 5,000 to 00. This is not good. Oh wait, maybe 00 is good? I mean, being a James Bond game and everything. Anyway, concerning, The next level takes you to Carver's printing press, so we're more or less following the structure of the film at this point. Bond is sent to investigate the printing press after techno-terrorist Henry Gupta was seen entering it, and MI6 believe that he has the GPS encoder that was tracking their satellites. Plenty more shooting action in this level, obviously being sure not to harm the innocent workers of the facility. There are some nice details in here as well. I like that the guys are wearing red jackets, like the goon that Bond faces in the film, and I really like the character names that are printed on some of the doors. It's nice to know that Dr. Kaufman and Satoshi Isagura have offices right next to one another. There are some unique animations when you shoot the guys positioned above the printing machines too, so they fall in recreating that moment from the film. There's a similar moment of recreation too when Bond uses a fingerprint scanner to get into the safe in Gupta's office. At this point in the game, I'm actually having a reasonable enough time. Yes, the controls are clunky, and yes, I prefer it when Bond games do something original with their stories rather than just replaying moments from a film that we already know. All that being said, though, still a good enough time. Again, following the structure of the film, Bond next heads to the Hotel Atlantic to meet with Paris Carver, and oh my goodness, does this hotel take its security seriously. I mean, everyone, even the damn receptionist is packing heat, and no one seems concerned that Bond is walking around with his holster on display. Like, I'm glad I'm not checking into this hotel. Excuse me, hi there, I booked ahead, I have a room for 3 nights? Ah yes, just the double room. Would you care to upgrade? No, I think I'm okay actually, thank you. Is that so? On second thoughts, maybe I will. Do you have a presidential suite? Get down! Get down! I'm sorry, you'll have to excuse me. A guest hasn't paid their room service bill. You can't even escape the aggression in the hotel bar. I mean, I've never been to Hamburg, but judging from this, I'm just assuming it's some kind of lawless Mad Max dystopia.
Can I help you, Mr. Bond?
I'm looking for Paris Carver. Have you seen her?
Yes, I believe she's waiting in your suite. And your presence is required there as well.
More shooting action eventually leads you to the hotel suite, where you encounter none other than Dr. Kaufman, who in this universe seems to be played by none other than Pope of Trash John Waters.
Ah, Mr. Bond. It's not nice to keep a lady waiting.
Where is Paris?
Let's talk about where the red encoder is first, shall we?
I pride myself on the fact that my work has no socially redeeming value. Anyway, Dr. Kaufman is a proper boss fight, and he has a health gauge and everything that you have to whittle down by chasing him around the hotel suite, avoiding his throwing stars, which is pretty cool and nuts. And once the good doctor is defeated, though, Bond must search the suite to inevitably find the body of Paris Carr.
Are you alright, Paris?
I think so.
Oh, well, this is awkward. I've seen the film. Shouldn't you be, well, this is an unexpected change. But are you, really alright? Are you absolutely positive? No vaguely death-related symptoms or anything? So yeah, the next objective is to escape the place with Paris, and all the way through playing this sequence, I kept expecting some goon to pop up, maybe even a not-dead Kaufman to throw a star at her and kill her or something, but no, you both make it back to the BMW 750, and Bond and Paris escape together. Just one more time, sorry, you are fine, right? Only my insurance, and for claims purposes, you're definitely not dead now, right? After a few levels of just kind of redoing the stuff that's in the film, the stuff that we all know, I was really surprised at this development. I mean, this is the first time I'm playing this game to completion, so I just kind of expected it to, you know, roll along the same tracks that the film does. But from here on, we take a bit of a detour, actually.
Intelligence has found the headquarters of Henry Gupta, a techno-terrorist now working for Elliot Carver. It's located in the foothills of the Swiss Alps. A convoy of terrorist cars and trucks is heading to his Alpine hideout for an important meeting. You must destroy this convoy. Q is waiting with your transportation just beyond the first barricade. Try to keep him out of the crossfire.
So yeah, we're going after Gupta, which is pretty cool. Not quite sure why Q is suddenly in possession of the BMW, given that you drive off in it at the end of the last level, but I guess this means that you just drop off Paris and she makes it out of the story alive. From this point on, actually, for the next couple of levels, the game shoots off on tangents for original missions not actually seen in the film. It's worth noting at this point that this game was originally being developed as a continuation of Tomorrow Never Dies and would have added the subtitle The Mission Continues and would have... Well, actually, I'll let a familiar face explain more.
Hello there. Look, I'm just testing this highly explosive top-secret Tomorrow Never Dies video game for PlayStation. The game starts where Tomorrow Never Dies ends and challenges you to think, act and behave, well, possibly not behave, like James Bond. I must say, it's lethal. And it's going to explode in the stores this autumn.
In that version of the game, we would have had Bond going after Satoshi Isagura, a drop name from the start of the film, who would have played a much bigger part in the story's continuation. David Bishop, then president of MGM Home Entertainment, is quoted as saying, "We didn't see any benefit to following the script verbatim. We just felt we had more freedom in what we could bring to the gaming world if we went outside the set script." That is a man after my own heart. But because focus group feedback told the game makers that they'd rather play through recreations of scenes from the film rather than something original, the game underwent a redevelopment to adhere closer to the story in the film. I don't have any concrete evidence of this, but I'm assuming that some of these original levels that we do have in the game were just kind of tweaked and, you know, the bookends were changed to kind of make them work within the narrative for the film that they were trying to tell, and that's why we have these original levels in here. It's a bit of a hodgepodge and it's not entirely seamless, but I'm a big fan of Bond games when they use original story content, so I'm happy to be here. So back to the game. This level has you rendezvous with Q, and to get to him you need to take out some bad guys utilizing an infrared sniper rifle, which is really cool. So body heat shows up as red. However, the problem with this is that Q is not a reptile, so... I guess R's gonna get that promotion a bit quicker than he expected. So, if you don't kill Q, he gives you the BMW 750, and then the music kicks up a notch, and it's off to a fully fledged driving segment. Always love it when Bond games make time for some gadget-laden vehicle action, and while this is nowhere near up to the standard of the vehicle sections in the likes of Nightfire and Everything or Nothing, it's a fun change of pace all the same. Presumably during all of this action you destroy Gupta's vehicle, and him as well. I mean, there's a big truck, and I just assume that he's in that, and when you blow it up, you've killed him, but it's really not very clear. Things do take an even bigger detour now, though, as the next level sends Bond to Japan to take out Satoshi Isagura himself. That level beginning with a ski segment. Oh boy, great stuff. I had such fun with the previous skiing level. In fact, I think that skiing levels are the very best thing to be in Bond games ever after that. So, well, let's go. Why ski level? I thought we were getting on, and then you go and do something like this. Maybe I just had a good run on the earlier level, or maybe I just had a slight stroke when I was playing it or something, but this level reaffirms my hatred for skiing segments in Bond games. It's tough to express because it's not that it's tricky to master or anything like that, it's just frustrating. You know it's not a good situation when completing a level gives you a greater sense of relief than accomplishment, and that's precisely what I feel here. Anyway, that's just the first part of the level. The next part has Bond skulking around Isagura's base of operations, and it's plenty more shooting action until you eventually reach Isagura himself, who is another boss battle. I really like that Bond's voice actor really captures Brosnan's ability to overpronounce certain words, by the way.
Ah, Satoshi Isagura.
Would you care for a mojito?
Seems you and Carver have been quite busy making headlines lately.
I presume you are referring to the nerve gas attack, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond, wise guy. The boss battle is all good. Isagora has some gas bombs which he sets off and helps make his battlefield different from previous ones. All in all, not bad, and defeating him completes the level, and next up oh wow, wait a minute. 6,000 style points. How did that happen? I really don't understand that particular category. Anyway, next up it's back to recreating bits from the film with a level set at the Carver Media Group Tower in Saigon. Bond's mission here is to find evidence of the existence of a stealth boat and its role in stealing a nuclear missile from the sunken Devonshire. From this level on, the difficulty certainly ratchets up a notch, and it makes sense, as obviously most games get harder as they go along, but it's such a sudden jump in how much damage bullets can do to you, and there's really little in the way of recovery without a proper cover system in place. It also doesn't help that every time you get hit, Bond kind of flinches, so you freeze and you can't fire back, and missing a beat when under fire can make or break entire levels. I do like the very little detail that Bond's neutral posing changes if he sustained a lot of damage though, and I got very used to seeing this particular pose during these last few levels. Bond is eventually captured and brought before Elliot Carver alongside Wei Lin. Meanwhile, I still can't get Paul O'Grady out of my head whenever I see Elliot Carver in this game.
Mr. Bond, Miss Lin, welcome to Saigon.
Always nice to see you, Elliot.
Do you like me tortured devices, Mr. Bond? If you think they're scary, you should try growing up on the docks in Liverpool.
Wei Lin has absolutely no introduction to Bond, but she is responsible for getting them out of this situation before running off and letting Bond fend for himself. Carver also scarpers off. A small detail that isn't really mentioned at all, but I do love that they have included all of Carver's torture devices, including the box from the film. Anyway, more shooting and objectives that I forget why they're important, but you need to collect a data disk and then destroy some weapons crates before shooting a window and making it over the edge with Wei Lin. At this point, if you haven't seen the movie or have forgotten about a lot of the details from that movie, things must really not make any sense here. There's no movie clip or line or anything to give context to Bond and Wei Lin just jumping off the roof of this tower, so it just looks like they're committing suicide together. Unfortunately, the next level around the market district of Saigon is not a vehicle-based level. You're not hopping on a motorbike like they do in the film, but rather you play as Wei Lin, oddly enough, as the setup from M explains.
Wei Lin, we need your help. Carver bribed the Saigon military police. Their orders are to kill Bond on sight, so we've had to pull him out. We understand you have a copy of the data disks that 007 found in Carver's tower. Take the disks to your branch headquarters and decode them to find the position of Carver's stealth boat. The military has set up roadblocks with armored 20mm chain guns. They may be looking for you as well. Proceed with caution until you can acquire heavier weapons.
I mean, what the hell? Wei Lin is under absolutely no obligation at all to start taking orders from the British Secret Service, especially when the implication is that, oh well, we would send in our agent, but we like him too much and he might die, so could you do it instead? I can only imagine what Wei Lin's reaction was like hearing this on the other end of the phone.
Wei Lin, we need your help. Carver bribed the
Yeah,
Saigon military police.
I don't work for you, actually.
We understand you have a copy of the
Look,
data
I just met this guy, like, half an hour ago, and we jumped out of a building together, but I don't think...
The military has set up roadblocks with
I've kind of got my own thing going on, so are you listening to me? It makes it even more funny when you start the level and after M's whole thing about, oh, well, they've been told to kill Bond, so you'll have to go in, Wei Lin. As soon as you start the level, Wei Lin starts getting shot at. There's no stealth aspect to this level at all, and being Wei Lin doesn't get you any kind of special privilege. It's just exactly the same as what it would have been if Bond was in her place. As cool as it is, though, to be playing as Wei Lin, and I do really like this feature of the game, actually. It's kind of one of my highlights, to play as one of the very best Bond girls in the series. Despite that being as cool as it is, this level was sent to us from the very depths of hell, and I hate it. If Hugo Drax could contain this level in pods and fire them to Earth from space, he would undoubtedly be able to destroy the entire population of the planet. I hate this level. It's simple enough in concept. As Wei Lin, you need to acquire some powerful weapons to take out the military blockades throughout the market. Good luck just popping down for a few oranges with all this going on, by the way. However, the blockades are so difficult to destroy without draining your own health. Again, because of how the mechanics work. If you're hit, the character flinches, and by the time you're recovering, you're already being hit again. I found the most painless way to take out the blockades was just to stay far enough back that the level has barely loaded, and then destroy them through the loading haze from way far back, but it's not exactly the most fun of experiences. A third-person shooter like this is really lacking without a decent covering system. The difficulty fluctuates so much as well. There's a boss battle with a bloke with a rocket launcher, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that that would be one of the harder parts of the level, but it's actually a breeze, and yet a single goon with the standard machine gun can completely obliterate you in a few seconds. The mechanics are just not well tuned, and obviously the lack of checkpoints is really annoying too. You can pick up 007 tokens, which give you an extra life, and basically if you lose all your health but you have extra lives, you regenerate and you keep going from the same spot. But if you don't have extra lives, you get chucked back to the beginning, and this can be incredibly frustrating. As is the medikit system, you can find these kits scattered around levels, and these are used by pressing a button whenever you want to use them, but in the middle of a firefight, it can just be really awkward to have to pay attention when to use them when you're trying to get your shot right. Again, I want to clarify, this is not a complaint about the level of difficulty, it's a complaint about the finesse of the mechanics. The mechanics are all so clunky, and they just don't gel with each other at all. It makes for a really frustrating rather than enjoyable experience. It took me a long time and many deaths to make it to the final part of the level, which is a showdown with a helicopter which you have to blow out of the sky, and with the aiming system being the clunky thing that it is, it just again makes for a really awkward experience. But eventually, when you do defeat the helicopter, actually, in a rather cruel move, you defeat the helicopter and you would have thought, like, well, that was the big boss, the level is over, but the game actually throws a couple of extra henchmen at you immediately after. This would be particularly annoying if you're low on health and think you're done after a particularly hard battle, and then your guard is down, and then you go through to the next section and one of these guys takes you out. Anyway, never have I been more relieved to see an end of level cutscene.
Finally back at the lab.
Tell me about it. In a bit of an odd moment, you have to input a code to find the location of the stealth boat, and I say odd, I guess, because I'm just used to games reusing certain mechanics in different ways throughout the experience, whereas here, this game seems just fine with just having, like, oh, this one coding segment, or this one driving segment, and so on, and it's like, God, was this even worth programming in for a single experience? Anyway, on to the 10th and final level of the game that takes place on Carver's stealth boat. It's an appropriately difficult level, I'd say, and not frustrating to the extent that the Wei Lin level was, but then, geez, I mean, that level just sets a whole new precedent for frustration. I mean, I almost cracked my controller in two with my bare hands numerous times. The level opens with a bit of an awkward cutscene between Bond and Wei Lin.
See if you can find the engine room and stop this boat.
I know what to do.
Alright, chill out.
James, be careful.
I think you're intending that stare to be one of longing, but it's actually just a little bit creepy. So long. First big goal is to shoot your way to some kind of control deck room where you can alert MI6 to the location of the stealth boat. The next goal after that is to rescue Wei Lin after she is captured, and I just love Bond's reaction to hearing this news.
Mr. Carver, we have Wei Lin, but there's no sign of Bond.
Oh, I should have just brought Paris along instead, her still being alive and everything. There's a mid-level boss battle with a goon with a grenade launcher. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be Carver's henchman Stamper from the movie. I mean, it feels like it should be him, but there's no reference to Stamper in the game, which is really weird considering Kaufman, Gupta, and Isagura are all featured in the game despite having less presence in the movie than Stamper. Shortly after that fight, you rescue Wei Lin, and it's all guns blazing towards a final showdown with Elliot Carver. The voice acting in some of these cutscenes is just killing me, by the way.
Mr. Bond, still trying to write a happy ending? Too bad you're missing the key part of the story. I'm afraid you'll need this to disarm the missile.
Carver, you can't win. The British and Chinese navies are closing in as we speak.
Your heroic attempts are pathetic. Kill him!
I know that video game voice acting has come a long way since this, but I mean, Bond just sounds so casual. He sounds like he's telling off a naughty child rather than a megalomaniac supervillain. I suggest you head to the naughty step and reconsider your plan of nuclear annihilation. There's plenty more shooting around the deck of the stealth boat, which eventually leads you into a boss fight with Elliot Carver, which sadly does not end with him being chopped up by the CVAC drill. It's a bit of a tricky fight though, more because of the confined location and the fact that there's nowhere safe to cover, but it's actually not as hard as some of the previous boss fights. Defeating the villain prompts a cutscene with more patronising tonal dialogue from Bond though, which I absolutely love.
This should punch up my headlines for tomorrow.
I think your story's over, Elliot.
Far from it, you ignorant fool. You see, I've set this boat to self-destruct in 3 minutes. You'll never escape in time. Tomorrow never dies.
I also love the completely unprompted title drop in Carver's line there. In fact, I think more Bond villains should use the titles of their films in their dying breaths. Thunder!
For England, James? No. For me.
GoldenEye! I had a powerful weapon. I charged 1,000,000 a shot. I was the man with the golden gun. After defeating Carver, the stealth boat is set to self-destruct, so there's only 3 minutes on the clock to stop the missile launch and blast through the last of Carver's goons to escape with Wei Lin. No flashy in-game cutscene or anything to finish with, though, just ending the game prompts a final message of completion, encouraging the player to replay the game on a harder difficulty, which is something I will never do so long as I live, and that's the very unshowy ending of Tomorrow Never Dies. Outside of the single-player mode, there's really nothing, in a surprising break from its home console predecessor GoldenEye, there isn't a multiplayer included at all with the game, so there's very little to encourage a player to return to this, actually. In terms of extra features, we have the ability to play short clips from the movie, where you can listen to some of the music from the game, weirdly just tracks 16 to 19, and, you can play a few sounds from the game, which is basically just a variety of beeps and camera shutter sounds. So I can't imagine anyone even being remotely interested in this. Like, seriously, who thought that was even a worthwhile thing to program into the game? Looking online, I did come across some cheat codes, which might be some incentive to return to replay certain levels, as some of these are quite bizarre. There's one which removes all walls and floors from the game, so you practically control Bond making his way through the Upside Down from Stranger Things, and another that creates a green box on the menu screen that does... well, nothing. Absolutely nothing. You put in the buttons in the controller and then this little thing appears. But for those of you who dream of the ability to create a green square around Pierce Brosnan's face, have at it, I suppose. This one's for you. There's your usual codes for invincibility and all that kind of stuff, but the other one that I found really quite fascinating was a debug mode, which basically means that you can walk through walls and floors and such. I say fascinating, but it's more like, well, I guess I'll try that for 30 seconds and then, yeah, that's a thing. I guess I'll go and play a better Bond game now, because overall this has been a relatively drab affair. Tomorrow Never Dies for the PlayStation 1 couldn't be a more average game. I had some fun at the start up until about halfway through, and there are some nice Bondian elements throughout, and I like it when it unexpectedly breaks away from the story that we know from the movie, but the gameplay is so repetitive and clunky, it's just not terribly engaging or memorable. Maybe with better controls I'd have had a better time. It's just so frustrating with trivial things like, you know, getting caught on corners or having to take ages to line up a shot that should be relatively simple. Some of the mechanics are just downright annoying. There's an ability to stealth takedown, for example, but it's so hit and miss as to whether or not it actually works. While there are nice Bond flourishes, and I undoubtedly feel like I'm playing a Bond game, I find the story unfocused, and possibly this is because the direction the game was heading in was changed halfway through its development, but as a result of that we have a hodgepodge of moments from the film paired with original narrative twists and turns that make no damn sense. It feels like cutscenes or maybe even whole levels are just missing that would have filled in the gaps. Later Bond games do a great job at making you feel like you're playing a Bond film with good structure and characters, and here... well, I guess they were kind of getting there, right? In fact, I think that's my summary of all three of these games now that I've completed them all in turn. If I were to rank them, it would be easy top is The World Is Not Enough, and then there is a steep drop to Tomorrow Never Dies, and then an even steeper drop to 007 Racing. Each of these games has elements that would be lifted, finessed, and combined to create the EA games on the next generation of consoles that would be the true golden era of Bond video games, and you can see in each of these on the PlayStation 1 the seeds that would grow into Agent Under Fire and Nightfire and Everything or Nothing, and that's kind of the best summary I have for them, if I'm being completely honest. They were the games that took the small steps so that later ones could leap. Unlike those later games, I wouldn't really recommend anyone outside 007 game completists need revisit the PS1 era for these three. I don't think they offer anything particularly special that you can't get from some of the later games, and the unique things that they do provide aren't really worth the hassle of finding the games in the first place, getting the consoles, finding a way to play them on a modern TV, and yet, all that being said, I still found it rewarding and interesting to revisit these from a contextual point of view, and I appreciate that I had the opportunity and the ability to do that. But aside from The World Is Not Enough, I even then am wishy-washy on whether or not I'm ever going to play that again. The other two, I will never play again. What a cheery note to end on, but have no fear, because we still do, believe it or not, have some good James Bond video games to cover on this channel, and I'll be revealing which one is going to be coming next in this series right after saying, if you've enjoyed what you've seen on this channel today, then please do hit the subscribe button below to stay up to date on future video uploads. I'm going to be covering even more James Bond games after this, and there are more reviews of James Bond video games on my channel already. Below there are links to my social media pages, so you have my Facebook page and my Twitter page. Very active on Twitter these days, so if you're going to follow me on one, please make sure it's that one. And then there is also a link to my Patreon page, where if you've really liked this video and you've already subscribed and liked this video and want to go one extra step in supporting this channel, please do follow that link for more details on that. And with all that being said, the next James Bond video game I'll be looking at on this channel will be GoldenEye for the N64, so it is the big one next time, folks. I'm really looking forward to revisiting that game in full, particularly as it's been so many years since I've played it to completion, and I'm just, yeah, I hope it holds up after all these years. Stay tuned and look out for that video upload, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.